Sunday morning has finally arrived. These last few days have been busy and a bit tense. With the exception of the president, our whole team was busy preparing for Monday's activities, when the expected influx of Yakuza personnel are expected to start arriving. I hope Soo-young remembered the plans Min-ho and I made a few days earlier. Min-ho and Dr. Jin were busy setting up the workstation, specifically to monitor all my vital signs, as I performed my daily activities, trying to discern some physiological explanation for some of these strange new abilities I have been developing. Throughout the morning, Min-ho and I have been exchanging glances, and she would smile at me whenever she caught me looking in her direction. Cindy was over by Soo-young's desk, standing behind her. She looked over in my direction, and started tapping on her wrist, as if to remind me that I had something important to do. I really didn't need the reminder. It was really the only thing I could think about since I got out of bed this morning. I waved to Min-ho to get her attention, and then pointed in the direction of Soo-young's desk. The two of us left our assigned area, as we met in front of our team leader. She continued reading the files she was engaged in, as we stood there quietly waiting. Cindy cleared her throat, trying to get Soo-young's attention. "Yes, Cindy," she said. "I know they are standing there. I am sure they are looking for a formal dismissal, even though I made it clear a few days ago they could have some time off. Go on. Get out of here," she said. As we headed for the door, Soo-young called out to me. "Shin. I assume if we really need you, you will come back right away." I gave her a sarcastic smile, and pointed at her. "If you really need me, I will probably know it, before you do." I don't normally like to push Soo-young's buttons, but I felt a little light-hearted humor would lighten her mood. With her right hand, she made a shooing motion for us to leave. We made our way to the parking lot, headed for Min-ho's car. Fishing through her purse, she located her keys and handed them to me. "Since you know the way, why don't you drive?" she said. Taking the keys from her hand, I escorted her to the passenger side of the automobile. I opened the door for her and assisted her into the passenger seat. This is the first time I have had the opportunity to play the part of a gentleman while escorting a young lady. I must say, I thoroughly enjoyed it. As we pulled out of the parking lot, Min-ho adjusted herself in the seat, so she could partially face me. "Shin," she asked. "What should I expect when I get there? For instance, what is the woman like? The one who Soo-young referred to her as, your mother?" It would be easy for me to make up some wisecrack, or to give her some type of superficial answer. But Min-ho has always seemed to be genuinely interested in me, so I searched carefully for the words to describe Sister Mary and our relationship. "Oh, where do I begin?" I started. "Well, Sister Mary is very unlike all the other nuns at the orphanage. I guess to understand her, the first thing you need to know is that she herself was an orphan. She lost her vision at a very young age, and as she became a young woman, she decided to serve the church in the best way she knew how. Although everyone referred to her as Sister Mary, most of the children in her care called her mother. She was very strict and yet very loving. I'm sure you've heard the expression, the patience of a saint. I feel pretty sure that saying best describes her. She would gather us together each morning, and read us our favorite stories from the Bible." Min-ho looked curious and asked me, "What was your favorite story from the Bible, Shin?" And then she sat quietly waiting for my response. I'm not really sure why, is how I began my reply, but I always loved the story of David and Goliath. You know, the story of the small shepherd boy that slew the giant. I guess I always admired his confidence to face the insurmountable odds without fear. I wish I had that kind of courage. Min-ho shook her head in disbelief. "Do you expect me to believe that you are not a courageous person? Did you already forget how we met? You may not have faced a giant, but it had to take a lot of courage to walk into a room full of gangsters and enemy soldiers, unarmed. There are not a lot of people who would have done that." I was silent for a moment, as I contemplated what Min-ho just said. I was actually terrified of walking into that room. I don't really know how I did it. Should I tell her what I really felt? It only seemed right. "Min-ho," I started my explanation. "The truth is, I was terrified when I walked into that room. I was so scared I could hardly talk. I'm afraid I'm not very brave at all." Min-ho chuckled. "You really don't get it, do you? If there is one thing I know about you, Shin, and that is, that you are a very smart man. I'm sure you calculated the risk before you accepted that assignment. You knew you could be placed in harm's way, and yet, you did it anyway. Courage isn't doing what comes easy. Courage is doing the right thing, no matter what the possible outcome might be. It's time you give yourself some credit." Min-ho's perspective of my nature seemed well thought out. How can she see me in a way I cannot see myself? What she said made sense in my head, but in my heart, I had difficulty accepting her words. Even though I desperately wanted to believe them. It seems our conversation has made the time move by quickly, as we pulled up in front of the orphanage. As I turned into the driveway, the familiar surroundings brought me unexpected comfort. It's been quite a while since I've been to the place I once called home. As we exited the vehicle, we were greeted by an elderly man wearing a large floppy hat, carrying some garden shears. As our eyes met, he smiled warmly as he recognized me. "Uncle," I called out, as he reached over and put his hand on my shoulder. I turned to Min Ho, so I could introduce them, until I realized that I have always called this man uncle my whole life, without ever knowing his real name. Realizing my dilemma, the elderly gentleman bowed to Min Ho and said, "It is nice to meet you. Everyone here just calls me uncle. Please do so. And what is your name, young lady?" Min Ho shyly replied, "I am Min Ho. And I would be honored to call you uncle." He then motioned with his hand for us to follow him. We walked at a slow pace, to accommodate his advanced years. Thinking back, he has had an elderly appearance as far back as I can remember. Although I was curious, I felt it would be rude of me to ask his age. But then, he brought the subject up himself. "You know, I have been the groundskeeper here for almost 70 years. I've seen a lot of kids come and go. But the thing is, Sister Mary brings up your name all the time. You should visit her more often. I do not know how much longer she will be with us." As we approached the garden in the rear of the building, close to the kids' playground, I could see the silhouette of Sister Mary, sitting on a bench enjoying the sun. Something didn't seem right, however. The closer we got, I could feel my senses heighten, as it had in the past when I anticipated danger. As we got closer to the bench, she stood, and turned around to face us. A pleasant smile beamed across her face as she held out her arms. "Come to me, Shin," she said. "It's been a very long time." I stepped ahead of Min Ho, and gave Sister Mary a brief embrace, and then she reached up to touch my face. "You have been a man for many years. But I see that you have matured quite a bit since the last time you were here." I didn't really understand the point she was trying to make. But it felt good to be in her presence once again. Then I presented Min Ho. "Mother," I said. "This is my friend Min Ho." To which she immediately challenged my statement. "A friend you say?" she uttered in a questioning tone. Then addressing Min Ho, she asked, "I guess he still hasn't outgrown that awkward stage around women yet." Min Ho seemed amused by her observation. "Shin, I know you better than anyone. And she wouldn't be here with you, if she wasn't someone very special." I felt awkwardly embarrassed, as she continued. "You know, when you first came to us, they brought me this precious little child with no name. And even though I am completely blind, I could see that he was someone special. He was a dim light, in my world of darkness. When the other sisters asked what we should name you, I decided to call you Shin. Because I had faith in you, since you were a baby. And you have never let me down." Min Ho looked curious. "What do you mean by that?" she asked. "Was there something different about him?" Sister Mary smiled, and grabbed each of our hands and sat us down, one on each side of her on the bench. Then she patted the top of my hand as she gazed towards the horizon. "Well, the thing is, Shin was very different from all the other kids. He had a keen sense of what is right and wrong, and was unusually considerate of others. Even of those who were less than kind to him. In many ways, he was a perfect child. But I always worried about him. For some reason, he has always lacked self-confidence. He was so smart compared to the other kids. And instead of making the other kids feel bad about their lack of understanding, he would always offer to help them with their studies. He has a very special gift." "I can see that," acknowledged Min Ho. "We actually had a similar conversation about that on the way here. He really can't see what an amazing man he really is. At first, I thought he was just being humble. But then, as I got to know him, well." And then she paused briefly before blurting it out. "I guess there is no nice way to say this. But he is really clueless about his abilities." Her words were both shocking and embarrassing at the same time, as Sister Mary began to laugh. "And I thought I was the only one who understood you. Shin, your new friend is very perceptive." Then she held out her hand to Min Ho. "Come on, child," she said. "Take my hand, and let's go for a walk. I would really like to get to know you better." I sat there on the bench, and watched as the two of them walked off. I knew if I really wanted to, that I had the ability to eavesdrop on their conversation. But I didn't want to invade their privacy. As they walked the grounds, Min Ho looked back at me several times. Often smiling at me as they spoke. At one point they stopped walking altogether, and I could feel they were both experiencing high levels of emotion. Sister Mary reached over and wiped a tear from her eyes. Min-ho stared at me briefly, with an intense look of concern on her face. I was very curious about their conversation, but I figured Min-ho would explain it to me later. I stood up as they returned to the bench. Min-ho was staring at me intently as Sister Mary began to speak. "Shin, your friend here is precious," she said. "I can understand why you enjoy her company so much. And if I were to guess, I would imagine she is as beautiful as she is charming." As Min-ho and I exchanged glances, we were both blushing with embarrassment, and at a loss for words. Sister Mary then chuckled as she elaborated on her assumption. "I guess I can assume that your silence means she is too beautiful to describe in mere words." We both laughed, as we realized she was trying to lighten the mood with some humor. "Listen, Shin," she continued. "I know how pressed for time you are, and the responsibility you're carrying right now. I really do appreciate you both stopping by here to see me today. Would you both promise to come and visit me when all this is over with?" Both of us quickly agreed, as we prepared to leave. I leaned over to give Sister Mary a brief hug before we departed. As we turned to leave, she reached out and grabbed Min-ho by the wrist. "Remember what I told you, dear. We will talk about it more the next time you visit." As we walked towards the car, I could feel Min-ho's mood has changed. She seemed less relaxed, and struggling with some type of internal conflict. I wanted to relieve her concerns. But at the moment, I was unsure what it was that was bothering her. The two of us began our journey back to join the rest of our team. Min-ho sat there quietly. She looked over at me several times, looking as if she wanted to ask me something, but she continued in her silence. I decided to break the ice and ask her directly what was bothering her. She sat quietly for a few more minutes before answering. "I know this will sound crazy, but I have to ask. Does Sister Mary have some special abilities? I mean, can she see the future, or read minds or anything like that?" Unsure of what she was getting at, I figured I would just take the direct approach and ask her. "Min-ho, did Sister Mary say anything that would upset you?" "Well, actually, she said a lot of things," Min-ho responded. "And I am not sure how to process some of it. For instance, she told me she has been unable to see anything except darkness since she was a small child. But then she said, once you came into her life, she could see rays of light whenever you were in her presence. At first, she thought you were a gift from God to her alone, but as you grew older, she began to realize that one day you would be a gift to all mankind. She is concerned, because now you are emitting an intense light that she described as intensely blinding to her soul. She told me, whatever it is that God has been preparing you for, is close at hand. She said, the world is full of darkness, and it is about to see the light you've been holding inside all this time. Does that make any sense to you?" I wasn't really sure how to answer her, but I could feel her discomfort, and I wanted to say something that would make her feel more relaxed. But I had to be honest. "Min-ho," I said. "I wish I could give you a good explanation, but it doesn't make any sense to me either. Please don't worry too much about it though. I think if something was really wrong, I would know about it." Min-ho continued to sit there quietly. I could see she was still deep in thought, trying to sort some things out. "Min-ho," I asked, "is that all she said? Is there something else bothering you?" She again sat quietly for a minute, and then she shifted in her seat to look more directly at me. "Shin, I have to ask you something. If you had to make a really difficult choice, and you knew you would have to give up everything that was important to you, maybe even your own life, would you do it, if you thought it was the right thing to do?" I exhaled deeply before answering her. Wow. That's a very deep question. I'm not sure any man would know what to do in that position, until he is faced with those circumstances. Why would you ask me something like that? It was just something Sister Mary told me. She said, if I loved you, that one day I might have to stand aside, so as not to get in your way. That even though your heart might be complete towards me, your sense of duty would overrule your heart. She said those words with complete conviction. She had faith, that no matter what, you would do the right thing without hesitation. And when I heard those words, it frightened me. Because I know what she said is true. It's who you are, and I'm torn. It's one of the things that I most admire about you, and it could be the one thing that rips us apart. I don't want to sound selfish, Shin, but I don't know if I am strong enough to withstand that. She then turned her head to look out the window, and began wiping tears off of her cheek. I never would have suspected that I would find beauty in words carrying so much pain. My heart was breaking, and all I wanted to do was say something that would make her feel better. But no words came to mind. Looking over at her, she just sat there motionlessly, and in silence. I somehow gathered the courage, and reached over and took her left hand in mine, and gently squeezed her fingers. She momentarily looked at our hands joined together, and turned back to looking out the window. She then tightened her grip on my hand briefly. Silently, we rode for the next few minutes, holding hands. I never would have imagined that holding someone by the hand could create such a strong bond between two people. As we got close to our destination, I felt it was time to do something to cheer her up, before we went back to work. "Min-ho," I asked, "what you said to me back there, a few minutes ago. Was that a confession about how you feel for me?" She quickly pulled her hand back, breaking the grip we shared, with a shocked look on her face. But then the smile returned to her lips. "How could you consider that a confession?" she asked. "It was just a hypothetical conversation. And you better not embarrass me by telling anybody what I said." We both had a laugh, as we pulled back into the parking lot. The day was eventful, and to some degree stressful. I hoped Min-ho found what it was she was looking for. She said she wanted to get to know me better. But to me, it seemed she was looking for reassurance. Reassurance that I might actually be the man she thought me to be. As Min-ho and I entered the office, there was a great deal of activity. Soo-young was on her phone while tapping on her keyboard, at a frantic rate. Kim Lee took notice of us entering, and rushed over to meet us. "Hey buddy, it looks like you were right. We are picking up a lot of activity at the airports in Japan. Just like you said." As he spoke those words, I suddenly became overwhelmed, as my senses started to soar. I used the sensors implanted in my body, and began tapping into the secured servers, as information flowed in at an inconceivable rate. Dr. Jin looked up from his computer terminal, and glanced in my direction. And then back at his computer screen. He motioned with his hand for us to join him. "It's happening now. Isn't it?" he asked. "You're feeling it again. Right?" I nodded to acknowledge to him that he was correct. Kim Lee looked at the computer screen with a confused look on his face, as the screen kept changing in milliseconds. "What does that mean?" he asked Dr. Jin. Dr. Jin responded by shrugging his shoulders, to indicate that he also was unsure of what was happening. And then he asked me, "Shin, let me take your pulse. I want to verify something." I offered him my right hand, and pulled my sleeve back a bit. Placing his fingers over my wrist, he began looking at his watch intently, counting the beats in his head. A smile came to his face, as he continued to monitor my vital signs. Then looking at Min-ho, he said, "You're not going to believe this, even though all the monitors we placed inside of him are showing activity off the charts. His pulse is that of a normal man, at complete rest. It doesn't make any sense." Then Min-ho asked, "What do you think that means?" Dr. Jin answered her with a bewildered look on his face. "Well, at this point, your guess would be as good as mine." And then the information I was absorbing started to make sense. I looked around the room at all the security screens and computer monitors and realized I needed to get everybody's attention. I closed my eyes briefly and locked all the computer screens and monitors. I called out to Soo-young. "We are not prepared for this. They are not sending a squad of assassins. They are sending an army." Then I pointed at one of the computer screens. "Look there," I said. "A little over 2 hours ago, they had a security breach at the port of Busan. A shipping container was stolen before it had a chance to clear customs. Its origin was from Japan. It was a highly coordinated attack. They were in and out in just a few minutes, extracting exactly what they wanted. Based on the shipping weight, it could be a weapons cache of extreme magnitude. I'm trying to track their whereabouts, but they went off the grid rather quickly. But I'm working on it. And in the last 45 minutes, 2 Japanese firms, with Yakuza ties, have booked corporate flights into Incheon Airport. I'm scanning all their passports, and I'm doing background checks as I go. It's not looking good. Those that have a record are the worst of the worst. But even more concerning, I have identified at least 36 members, who are complete ghosts. They have doctored passports that will pass customs, but they definitely are not in the system. This will make them hard to track with our facial recognition software." Then I closed my eyes once more, and returned the control of the computer screens and monitors back over to the rest of the team. I could see Soo-young reach for her phone and tapping on the screen to initiate a phone call. I could tell she was informing the president of our current situation. She looked serious as she hung up the phone. Her eyes locked onto mine. Even though I can't read minds, I knew exactly what she was thinking. Then Soo-young stepped out from behind her desk and called out, "Listen up, people. You heard what's coming. We have no time to lose. Kim Lee, I need you to put a few security details together to be on standby at the airport. Shin, I need you to flag those phony passports, so they are denied entry, and I need you to supply Kim Lee with the identity of the remaining members, with as much intel as you can provide. And then she glared at me momentarily and asked, "Why are you still standing there?" I meant I need it done right now. Trying not to make a scene, I walked past her, and leaned in when I got close. "It's already done. I will help Kim Lee. He has everything in an email." Her demeanor changed as she apologized. "Sorry, Shin. I forgot for a minute what you were capable of. Carry on." I followed Kim Lee to his workstation. "Check your email," I said. "I just forwarded you all the information." "I'm already on it," he said, showing me the notification on his phone. He held his hand over his head, waiting for a high five. Of course, I couldn't leave him hanging. We had work to do. Slapping his palm, we then positioned ourselves before his computer, sorting through the details. Looking over, I saw Cindy. Standing alone, looking scared. I put my hand on Kim Lee's shoulder, and pointed in her direction. "I know," he responded. I tried to tell her everything would be okay. "But you know how she worries. Why don't you try talking to her?" he recommended. "Sometimes I think she believes you more than she does me anyway." I patted Kim Lee on his shoulder, and then straightened up before looking in Cindy's direction. What could I possibly tell her that Kim Lee hasn't said already? As I approached her, a nervous smile replaced her uncomfortable expression. "Are you doing all right?" I asked. Then she looked, and pointed in Kim Lee's direction. "I suppose he sent you over here to talk to me. What could you possibly say that he hasn't said already?" It was as if she read my mind. "Funny, I was just thinking the same thing myself." As I walked over here, I told her. "You know he doesn't want you to worry. I feel pretty sure that's why he doesn't share too much about what he does on the job with you. He just doesn't like to see you worried." "I really try not to worry," she said. "But when I hear things like an army of assassins and a cache of weapons, how can I not be worried? And I know what you're going to say. Kim Lee is the best. There is nothing to worry about. But just look at the faces of everyone in the room. I'm not the only one who is worried." She was right. We were all worried. But each of us had an assigned duty to keep our minds busy. Cindy's duties were less focused in one area. "I know there is a lot going on, Cindy," I said. "But I have a favor to ask. You see Dr. Hyo sitting over there? He seems to be having trouble organizing everything in his cubicle. It seems he lacks organizational skills. Do you think you could help him arrange his files, and help get them uploaded into the computer mainframe?" She rolled her eyes at me. "Shin, did you think I would fall for that? You just want to keep me occupied, so I don't think about it too much. Right?" "I can't fool you, Cindy," I laughingly replied. "But would you humor me and do it anyway?" Cindy smacked me with the back of her hand in my stomach area, before heading in the direction of Dr. Hyo's workspace. When she greeted him, he immediately cleared a space for her to join him. He seemed very gracious and happy to have her company. Soo-young came up behind me, sharing my observation. "You know, that was very clever of you to pair those two up at a time like this," she said. "Things will probably be a little tense around here for a while." I took in a deep breath before responding to Soo-young's statement. "You know, I understand Cindy's concerns. If things go wrong tomorrow, well, let's just say, it has the potential to be a real bloodbath, if we don't get this right. Don't worry about it too much. Shin," she said, as she turned and began walking back to her desk. "I have a secret weapon." "A secret weapon?" I repeated in a questioning tone. "What secret weapon?" She stopped briefly and turned, aiming both hands with her fingers pointed in my direction. I wish I had the faith in myself that Soo-young seems to have in me. Tomorrow, we just have to get this right. For everyone's sake. Today is the day we have all been preparing for. The three of us stood there, staring at the back door of the medical facility where we had established our remote command center. I could feel the tension. Kim Lee's focus seemed to be on high alert, whereas Cindy's concerns seemed to be more personal. This is the first time Cindy has been aware of a special operation in progress. She was very quiet, and nervously biting her lower lip. I decided someone needed to take the first step. So I sighed, and blurted out. "Well, we better get inside, before Soo-young sends the troops out looking for us." As we entered the conference room, it looked more like an army barracks. Men and women, lined up on both sides of the room. Dressing in dark tactical gear, cleaning, and checking their weapons. Soo-young waved us over to where she was standing next to a table with communication devices and body cameras. She was also dressed in full tactical gear with her hair pulled back. Even though we've never seen her geared up before, it looked almost natural on her. Her very dominant personality seems to make her scary looking, no matter what she is wearing. Soo Young was getting ready to address us, when Dr. Hyo approached. "Good morning everyone," he said as he greeted us. "Listen, I know you have a lot going on around you, but if it's not too much to ask, could you please allow Cindy to help me again today? I couldn't believe how much I accomplished yesterday with her help. I should have hired an assistant a very long time ago." Soo Young quickly agreed, "Of course. She has been a big help to me as well. But I don't think I will be needing her today." Dr. Hyo smiled and thanked her. Then turning to Kim Lee he said, "You are a very lucky man. Your wife is as charming as she is well organized. She is not only helping me get the job done, but I am actually enjoying myself while doing it." Then he guided Cindy as they began walking away in the direction of his workstation. But after a few steps, he stopped and turned. Then once again he interrupted Soo Young, as she tried to brief us. "I just want to say, please be very careful out there today. I may not understand how to run a security operation, but looking around the room at the preparation, and the abundance of weapons, I have to assume there is a great deal of danger involved. So please, take whatever precautions you need to stay safe." At that, he bowed low, and returned to his desk. There was a brief moment of silence. My overly sensitive ability to read the mood of those around me made a few things quite clear. First, Dr. Hyo's concern for us was completely genuine. And second, both Kim Lee and Soo Young were able to feel it too. Then Soo Young began instructing Kim Lee about how the operation was to be handled. "I will take the first team, and I will place them strategically around the landing strip and in the boarding areas. Kim Lee, I need you to take the second team and man the customs area while they are checking passports. We have to take out as many of these guys as we can, before they hit the streets." "What about me?" I asked Soo Young. "Where do you want me to be stationed?" "Shin," she responded. "I can't take the chance of you getting recognized. Or let any of your special abilities be put on public display. I will need you here to run the operation. You will be our eyes and ears. Normally, I wouldn't trust anyone to do this but me. But something tells me I'm making the right call on this one." Then Soo Young picked up a body camera off the table and turned it on. As the light entered the camera lens, it was as if another eye opened up inside my head. Anything the camera focused on, I could see as if I was looking at it directly with my own two eyes. As Soo Young scanned the room with the camera, it briefly stopped over in the direction of the medical staff. Min Ho and Dr. Jin looked up from their computer screens, and started staring at me intently. Soo Young must have realized that I was experiencing some kind of confusion, when she asked, "What is it? Shin? Why the blank stare?" Without answering her, I picked another camera off the table. Turning the switch to the on position, another window opened inside my head. It took a minute for me to mentally digest everything I was experiencing, but suddenly it all became clear. Picking up a comm unit, I turned it on before handing it to Kim Lee. "Say something into the microphone. Anything at all." Kim Lee held the communication device close to his lips, and uttered the word "testing." Then he asked, "What is it? What are you doing?" Realizing what was happening, a smile came to my face as I turned and pointed to one of the monitors on the wall. And then taking control of its feed by just visualizing it. "Kim Lee," I said. "You're going to love this. Watch." And then I cast the images being recorded by the two cameras onto the screen. Kim Lee and Soo Young watched in silence as Dr. Jin and Min Ho approached from the rear. "Are you doing that?" Min Ho asked. "Is this the unusual brain activity we have been reading over there?" "I'm not really sure how I'm doing it. But yes, the cameras, the computers, and even the communication devices have all become an extension of my body. In my head, I can see what the cameras see. And hear what the microphones pick up. I can focus in and out, and listen as if I were using my own eyes and ears. And I can process the information however I want. I can cast it on a computer monitor, send it in an email." At this point, Kim Lee's phone chimed to indicate he had received an email. And then looking at Soo Young, I continued. "I can even send it in a text message." Soo Young's phone vibrated, as she checked the screen. Tapping on the electronic notification, a message opened, displaying the feed from one of the cameras. A confused look came over her face as she turned to Dr. Jin and asked, "How is this possible?" Dr. Jin took a deep breath, and held it briefly before exhaling. "Well," he started. "There is no scientific explanation for it, but I do have a theory. Every time he taps into any type of electronic device, his brain activity spikes. If I were to guess, I would say that the sensors that we implanted in his body are functioning similar to a linked Bluetooth device, transferring information between whatever device he is linked to, and feeding it directly into his brain. Then he chuckled briefly before continuing. You know, if I tried to present a theory like this to a panel of my peers, I would become the laughing stock of the medical profession. Then Min-ho asked. How did you know you could do that? I mean, surely there has to be some explanation for all this. Then Min-ho's phone dinged, indicating she had received a text. She opened the message, to find she was receiving a direct feed from the biosensor, monitoring my heartbeat. With each beat, she could hear the audible sound of my heart pounding in my chest, as she watched the pulse on a graph, traveling across the screen from left to right. As she looked up from her phone, her eyes met mine as she asked, Shin, what does this all mean? Then Kim Lee interjected. Well, I'm no expert, but I think that means he has a crush on you. Following a brief moment of laughter, where even Soo-young seemed amused by his statement, I prepared to offer my explanation. Min-ho, honestly I have no idea how I do it, but it is as simple as bending a finger. I can move, change, and direct things to happen as easily as turning my head to the right, or to the left. Then Soo-young checked her watch. Well boys and girls, she said. It's almost time. We will have to explore this in greater length, when time is more permitting. Turning on her comm unit, she ordered into the microphone, bring the vans around. It's time to roll out. Then looking to Kim Lee she asked, are you ready for this? Kim Lee held his hand out, with his palm facing her. Seriously, she questioned. Do you really expect me to give you a high five? She asked. Kim Lee stood there silently with his hand out, still waiting patiently. Soo-young's patience was running out. Okay, she said, I guess it won't hurt, just this one time, as she reached over to slap his palm. Then turning her attention to me, her tone became more serious. Shin, the success of this mission hinges on you. Superpowers or not. You are the only man I would trust to run this operation. I have complete faith in you. As she finished her statement, I held my hand out, with my palm facing her. Not you too, she said, as she rolled her eyes, and a frustrated expression began to dominate her face. As she leaned in to slap my palm. Are you happy now? Can we do some national security stuff now that playtime is over? Kim Lee and I couldn't help but laugh, as we watched Soo-young hold her watch in front of her face, trying to hide her smile. It's go time, boys. Time to go load up the vans. Kim Lee put his fingers to his lips, and made a loud whistling noise to get everybody's attention. Listen up, he shouted. Everybody get your gear together, and I will meet you outside. As I watched everyone in the room, prepare to depart, I began to develop a strong feeling of déjà vu. Everyone fell into formation behind Kim Lee and Soo-young, as they prepared to exit the building. It reminded me of the dream I had, as Kim Lee read to me about the soldiers, moving in formation in the courtyard of the king's garrison. I am not sure why that came to mind, but at this very moment, it feels more like a memory, than a second-hand account from someone else's journal. Cindy and I followed close behind, as we wanted to see them off safely. Each team lined up behind one of the unmarked transport vans. Soo-young and Kim Lee opened the rear doors, to start loading the security personnel on board. As the line shortened, with each man taking a seat in the van, Cindy and I slowly made our way to where Kim Lee was standing, as the last member of his team boarded the van. Cindy timidly approached Kim Lee, looking uncomfortably vulnerable. Kim Lee reached out with both of his hands, and pulled her face towards his. As their foreheads touched, he said to her in a low, reassuring tone, "Everything is going to be okay." Then he softly kissed her forehead. This also triggered a memory of the distant past, but this time, it gave me a comforting feeling. The anguish I was feeling began to recede. As they parted, Cindy struggled to put a smile on her face, in the hopes that Kim Lee wouldn't worry. I could feel she was breaking inside, and I'm quite sure Kim Lee could feel it too. As Soo-young loaded the last member of her team into the second van, she turned to face us. Kim Lee and I stood at attention, and offered Soo-young a respectful salute. Holding our position, she raised her fingers to her brow, and returned our salute. Then she turned her attention to Cindy. "Don't worry," she said. "I've had a lot of practice keeping Kim Lee out of trouble. I'm getting pretty good at it. And besides, Shin will be running the operation. Between the two of us, there is really nothing to worry about." Cindy wiped a tear from her cheek, and respectfully bowed to Soo-young in silence. I put my arm around Cindy as the van doors closed, and the security personnel drove away. Cindy exhaled deeply, and stood motionless, until the vehicles were no longer in sight. I tugged at her shoulder, motioning for us to head back inside. She began wiping the tears off of her cheek, as we entered the building. Coming into the conference room, Min-ho immediately recognized Cindy's distress, and rushed to her side. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Is there anything I can do?" Cindy shook her head in silence. Min-ho, I asked. Could you please take Cindy to get her some tea? And maybe you can sit with her for a few minutes. Min-ho nodded, as she put her arm around her back. As the two of them made their way back to Min-ho's desk, Dr. Hyo came up behind me. That poor, sweet girl, he said. It breaks my heart to see her like that. Do you think she will be all right? He asked. The thing about Cindy and Kim Lee is, their whole worlds revolve around each other, and their young son. Although they are complete opposites, I've never seen two people more compatible. That being said, I don't think either one of them would make it if something happened to the other. Until today, I never really understood why Kim Lee tried so hard to shield Cindy from the harsh realities of his occupation. But after seeing that look on her face today, I'm beginning to understand his hesitation to share that part of his life with her. I can't imagine what it would be like to walk into a dangerous situation, carrying that image in your head. I don't think I could do it. Dr. Hyo placed his hand on my shoulder, tapping his fingertips against my back several times. You know, young man, he said. I know things are a real mess right now. But getting to know all of you has been a very enlightening experience for me. My circle of friends mostly consisted of colleagues and financial supporters that fund my research. Our relationships have all been formal and professional. Being able to spend time with you and your team here has given me a new perspective. I'm going back to my desk now, but if you need anything at all, please let me know. Then he looked across the room at Cindy, sitting there silently. He lowered his head and slowly headed back to his workstation. I always feel a great deal of confusion in Dr. Hyo's presence. First, it seems like he is intentionally hiding something from us, and then again, his concern for all of us is unquestionably genuine. Walking over to Soo Young's desk, I took a seat behind her computer terminal. I leaned back in the chair and cleared my mind. Closing my eyes, the essence of my very being became connected to everything in the room. Information from the internet began flowing through me at an incalculable rate. This should be interesting.